There's a kind of suffering that doesn't make noise. It doesn't cry. It doesn't scream. It doesn't ask for help. It just it just goes quiet, and it shows up in blank stares, in ghosted conversations, in the man who says I'm fine when his whole life he's been falling apart. It shows up in the one who stopped dreaming and hoping or even trying because it felt like nothing mattered anyway. And that suffering has a name: emotional numbness. And it's not the flaw in the system, it is the system. And we are living in a culture that conditions men to disconnect from their hearts, to disconnect from their bodies, to disconnect from their pain, and eventually from their ability to feel at all. And somewhere along the way, boys are told that, well, either directly or indirectly, that emotions make you weak, or don't cry, or don't be soft, or control yourself. Be logical, right? Or man up. And you probably heard that one too often. And then they learn, oh, and they really learn this, to stay silent and to look strong, and to push it down until one day they don't even know that they're pushing down anymore. It just becomes this dull ache, a constant fog, a life that looks functional, but it feels quite empty. This is what emotional numbness does. It doesn't happen all at once, but it happens gradually, like kind of like frostbite. You see, first the pain is sharp and it's obvious, and then eventually it turns dull. And then eventually it just disappears altogether. And that's when it's most dangerous, because when you can no longer feel, you can no longer connect. You can no longer connect to yourself, or to others around you, to the world that you're in. And suddenly you start to wonder, what's the point? I mean, why try? Why reach out? Why hope in the first place, right? And this is where despair lives. It's not in the rage, but in the absence of emotion. Not in the tears, but in the tears that won't come anymore. And the worst part is this: most people don't even see it, because numbness is quiet. It's invisible. It hides in routines. It hides in humor. It hides in sarcastic deflection. And it wears the mask of I'm good. And it passes as low maintenance. It gets mistaken for being chill or easygoing or unbothered. But underneath is a man who doesn't remember the last time that he felt fully alive. So this episode is for that man, the one who knows how to survive, but doesn't know how to feel anymore. For the one who functions in the world, but can't remember the last time that he felt moved by it. It's for the one who's lost, not because he lacks direction, but more so because he's lost contact with himself. Now, you don't need to be fixed. You don't need a new strategy. You don't need a personality transplant. You need permission to feel, and to thaw, and to be human again. So let's start here. You were not born numb. You were born with a full emotional palette. There was joy on that palette, and sadness, and curiosity, and anger, and fear, and delight, and grief, love. You're born able to feel all of that. But along the way, the world made you choose, and it offered you a deal: be strong or be emotional. You can't be both, is what the world said. And you, like so many boys, chose strength, or at least what looked like strength, and you learned to armor up. You learned to contain. You learned to pretend. But the real cost wasn't just emotional. It wasn't just that emotional restriction per se. It was the loss of aliveness. Because numbness doesn't just protect you from your pain, it also disconnects you from the joy that's possible. And it disconnects you from experiencing love and awe and presence. It turns life into a loop of obligation where you check the boxes, you show up to the job, you play the role, but you're never fully here. Let's break down how this numbness forms in men and why it's so often mistaken for strength, and how permission to feel is not a weakness, but rather the beginning of healing. Because being alive does not begin when you win. It begins instead when you feel. So let's talk about how numbness is created, because it's not random. It's not a weakness. I must remind you, it's a survival tactic, right? Most emotional numbness in men doesn't come from being born indifferent. It comes from being taught to suppress. You learn early that crying makes people uncomfortable, and that being too sensitive invites ridicule. And expressing fear makes you look fragile, and admitting confusion makes you a target. And showing pain opens up the door to even more pain. So you shut her down. You stop asking for comfort, and you stop saying when something actually hurts. You stop showing sadness, and you stop speaking up when you feel lost. And over time, that shutting down becomes automatic, and you don't even notice it anymore. It just becomes the water that you're swimming in, till the only thing that you feel is nothing. But here's what's the dangerous part. You see, the world often rewards men for being numb. It says, he's so strong, nothing rattles him. He's so chill, and he never gets emotional. He's so focused. He doesn't get caught up in all the drama. But what they're calling strength, that might just be emotional silence, dressed up in productivity. And while the world applauds, your inner world, meanwhile, is suffering. Because you're just not suppressing the pain, you're actually suppressing your humanity in the midst of it all. You're suppressing the vital part. And eventually this shows up in your relationships. And you don't know how to respond when someone else cries. You kind of freeze when someone asks, how are you really? And you feel bored during connection because the other person is boring. But because you're not being present in your own heart, you miss those opportunities. And when people leave, you don't feel it fully. You just shut it down. And you say, it is what it is, and you move on. But that grief does not disappear. It accumulates, and it becomes a heaviness, a weight that you carry in your chest, even when you cannot name it. So why does numbness persist, though? Because it works. It works until it doesn't. It helps you survive when the feeling is too dangerous or feels too dangerous, and it gives you a way to function when life feels unbearable. But numbness is not peace. It's a pause. It's the emotional emergency brake, if you will, that's been pulled too many times. And eventually something in you starts to stall. And you notice that you can't cry when you need to, and you can't feel when you should be able to, and you can't connect when you're even trying. And that's when numbness stops being helpful. That's when it becomes deadly. Not always physically, though. Sometimes, yeah. But also emotionally and relationally and spiritually. It kills that spark and that desire, the hope, the ability to say, I want more from this life than just surviving. And here's the truth, that is, you were meant to feel. You were meant to grieve. You were meant to be angry and to fall in love and to break down and to start over again. Feeling isn't something to be tolerated. It's how we process life. It's how we heal. It's how we connect. And without it, you can't access intimacy. You can't build trust. You can't lead with empathy. And you can't experience awe or passion or real safety with others. Now, you might be physically alive, but emotionally, you're disconnected from your own pulse. So how do we begin to thaw? It starts with permission, not from someone else, but permission from you. You give yourself permission to cry without the shame. Give yourself permission to name the anger without apologizing for it. Give yourself permission to grieve what you never got to feel the pain you were never allowed to feel, and to let it rise, to stop judging yourself for being human. And that act, it's not indulgence, it's not a weakness, it's courage, it's a reclamation. It's the first step in building integrity. Because when your outer life reflects what's going on in your inner reality, you're no longer fractured. You're no longer pretending. You're finally whole. Let me walk you through some practical ways to reconnect with your emotions and how to feel again after years of shutting down, and how to hold space for your own grief, and how this emotional honesty becomes the foundation for real intimacy and belonging. Because emotional numbness might have helped you survive, but it's not how you come alive. It's what does it look like to come back to life, though? To reconnect with the emotions that once were buried deep. I think first you need to know this. Feeling again is not going to feel good at first. It's going to feel like chaos and confusion, like a flood, because everything that you stuffed down doesn't disappear. It waits. And when you finally crack that door open, it all wants out. The anger that was suppressed, the sadness that was stifled, the regret that was diminished, the fear that was minimized, the grief that has been nullified. But just because it's intense, it doesn't mean that it is wrong, though. It means that you're waking up. And here's how you begin to thaw. Firstly, start naming it. You see, most men have not been taught an emotional vocabulary. They can describe physical sensations, perhaps, like tight chest or clenched jaw or exhaustion. But when they're asked, what are you feeling? They default to, I don't know. So start small. Use emotional charts, so very helpful. Use metaphors. Say things like, I feel heavy, like I'm dragging something that's behind me and it's super heavy. Or I feel tight, like I'm bracing for something that hasn't quite happened yet. I just feel tense. Or I feel blank, but I know something's underneath it. You don't have to say the right feeling per se. You just have to start noticing and describing. So pay attention to your body, because your body speaks. So when it speaks, listen. Secondly, let the emotions move. Emotions equal energy in motion. It's not meant to be stored indefinitely. So when sadness rises, let it move. Cry. When anger comes, move your body. Scream into a pillow. Hit something safe. Right? Don't intellectualize the sensation right away. Just don't even try to fix it. Just feel it. You've been taught to manage and to contain and to master. But healing begins when you surrender. When you surrender to that experience of emotion. And it's not just the explanation that you're surrendering to. Thirdly, talk to someone. I don't mean performing. I mean tell the truth. Let someone into that mess that you're experiencing on the inside. Say things like, I think I've been numb for a long time, and I don't know what I'm feeling, but I know I need to feel something, right? I'm scared that if I feel too much, I'm gonna break. for example, right? Let someone hold that space for you to express that, because you weren't meant to feel it alone. You weren't meant to grieve alone. You weren't meant to be numb alone. Intimacy, it begins the moment that someone says, I see you in your mess and I'm not going anywhere. Here's the next shift. Practice feeling even when no one is around. This is where self-trust begins to build. When you can sit with the sadness without any distraction, without needing to fix it, without numbing it with porn or work or endless scrolling. It's just you and maybe a journal or a voice memo or even a long walk. But let the feelings come. They are your compass and not your enemy. They are your evidence of aliveness. And here's a secret. The more that you feel, the more that you're able to reclaim that power back. Not the control over other kinds of power, but that internal power, the power to choose rather than to react, the power to grieve and still be able to show up, the power to hold your truth without exploding or collapsing. This is emotional resilience. This is emotional maturity. This is what makes you trustworthy, not just to others, but also to yourself. And slowly, that numbness fades away, and you start to laugh and actually mean it, and you cry, and you feel lighter afterwards, right? You notice beauty again, and you notice music moves you, and that touch does not feel threatening. And words begin to land in your chest instead of bouncing off. That's what coming alive feels like. It's not perfection, not a constant joy, just presence, just truth, just you finally feeling again. Let me explore with you what it looks like to live in emotional openness for the long term, okay? Or how to protect that zone or nourish it or lead it with relationships without collapsing into chaos per se. Because permission to feel isn't just a momentary thing. It's a lifestyle. It just might save your life. So let's talk about what comes after that thawing process that we were describing earlier. What does it look like to live day by day as a man who has given himself permission to feel? Because once you've reawakened like that part of yourself, once you've broken through that numbness, it's then that you'll realize something profound, and that is feeling isn't the end of your strength. It's actually just the beginning of your leadership, if you will. Yeah, I think leadership, because emotional awareness is not a liability. It's instead the capacity or a depth or a wisdom, right? It's what really allows you to walk into a room and bring your presence instead of pressure. It's what allows you to sit across from someone who's in pain and not panic. It's what allows you to love, and not just love intensely, but honorably as well. But now the question becomes this: how do you protect this emotional openness without losing yourself in it? How do you stay soft without being walked over? How do you stay grounded without shutting down again? This is where emotional integrity comes in, because feeling everything is not the goal. Feeling truthfully and responsibly, that is what we're aiming for. Here are 3 ways to live with emotional integrity. Number 1, slow down enough so that you can notice. Notice that you can feel. The key is to stay present with what's real and not what's loud. So your fear might be loud. Your shame might be loud. But underneath that might be something that's softer, like disappointment, sadness, tenderness. If you move too fast, you're going to miss those subtle experiences. So slow down and take space. Notice when you're reacting instead of responding. And then ask yourself, what am I really feeling in this moment right now? What do I need that I'm afraid to name? What part of me is trying to protect me? And can I think it instead of obeying it maybe? This is emotional presence in action. Secondly, lead with ownership, but not with blame. Once you start feeling again, the temptation is to expect others to manage your emotions, to make you feel safe and to validate you every time that you feel something that is big and intimidating. But emotional integrity says, my feelings are mine to feel, and they're mine to name. That means instead of saying, oh, you made me feel like this, instead you say, I noticed I felt triggered when this happened, and I'd like to talk about it. Now, this isn't being soft. This is being solid. This is being safe. And not because you're perfect, but it's because you're aware. And then thirdly, stay in relationship with yourself. Your emotional world is a relationship. And like any relationship, it needs to be checked. It needs to have check-ins. So don't just feel when things are falling apart, but make this a rhythm. Every week, ask yourself, where am I holding tension in this moment? Or what am I grieving that I haven't named yet? Or what joy am I allowed to fully feel? And when you do this, you start to build self-trust within yourself. You become the kind of man who doesn't just react to life. You instead respond to your own movements in your heart. And that's where peace comes from. Not from life being easy, but instead from you being anchored. Now, let's talk a little bit about relationships, shall we? Because when you feel more deeply, you will connect more deeply. But that also means that you're also going to notice emotional unsafety faster. And you'll have to make hard decisions along the way. You may find that you can't tolerate superficiality anymore. That banter with no depth feels hollow. And that emotionally unavailable people are no longer magnetic. They're exhausting. and you'll start craving honesty and openness. And you'll start looking for people who can sit with your truth without trying to change it. Okay? And the more that you live in that space, the more you're able to become the man that others feel safe with. This is how intimacy becomes real. And it's not because you've mastered emotions, but instead it's because you've become a home for them. It's not because you're perfect at expressing, but more so because you're committed to not hiding anymore. That's commitment. That's what changes lives. That's what changes your own life and the lives of those that you're brave enough to let close to you. So let me leave you with this. You do not need to earn the right to feel. You do not need to justify your tears. You do not need to apologize for your depth. And you do not need to retreat every time emotions rise up. You are not weak. You are awakening. You are not too sensitive. You are in touch. And you are not broken. You are becoming whole. And every time that you choose to feel instead of to numb, every time you choose to lean in instead of to shut down, every time you choose to speak honestly instead of disappearing, in those moments you are building the bridge back to your own soul. And from that bridge From that bridge, you can finally begin to cross towards others as well. Not to be rescued, but to be fully met. I pray that that's your experience.